Hello and welcome into Devils in Detail headquarters here at the beautiful Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm Hunter Robinson, and on this week's show we're talking men's and women's basketball, hockey, softball, and baseball. So let's get started. The men's basketball team had an interesting weekend. Facing a weekend where they realistically could have won both games, the Sun Devils went 1-1, winning a close one against the University of Washington on Thursday, but then dropping their game against Washington State on Saturday after leading at halftime. With only 3 games remaining before the Pac-12 tournament, it is important for the Sun Devils to gain as much momentum as they can before the Pac-12 tournament begins. We now bring in Zach Pekale and Alyanna Harina to break down this past weekend for the Sun Devils and to preview this final stretch of the regular season. Thank you, two, for joining me. So, Alyanna, I'll go ahead and start with you. The Sun Devils, they lead at halftime against Washington State, and it looks like they're going to hang on and win, and then all of a sudden something happens. What happened?
Right, so that first half was definitely a formula for success for the Sun Devils. They were hot shooting. They were playing aggressive on defense, especially within the transition. But in that second half, when Washington State went on that 7-0 run, I feel like the Sun Devils just lost their sense of urgency. That, and with the fact that they couldn't adjust to the fact that Washington State was now very much using Josh Hawkinson and Connor Clifford, their huge big men. They just couldn't adjust, and that's, I think, where the Sun Devils definitely failed.
All right, so Zach, what does this upcoming weekend have in store for the Sun Devils as they'll be hosting both UCLA and USC?
Well, they're taking on 2 of the top 4 teams in the Pac-12 this weekend. First off, you have UCLA, who has been a very dominant team. I think they have something to prove. Only rated a 4 seed in the latest bracketology for Joe Lunardi. I think this team is probably a little ticked off that they're not being respected the same way that Arizona and Oregon are. So I do believe that they're going to come out firing on all cylinders and probably will beat ASU by 20 to 25 points realistically. USC is a different story. They lost by 3 in LA earlier this year. They didn't have Benny Boatwright, which is a big story to look for. But I do believe that even with that Boatwright's presence will make USC a much more formidable opponent, where the Devils realistically are losing by 10 to 15 points and getting swept this weekend.
So, Alyanna, we talked about it. ASU was unable to put out a consistent product against Washington State, but that's sort of been an issue for them all season. Right. Why has that been such a huge issue?
You've seen it with Utah and obviously with Washington State. Both games, the Sun Devils led in the first half and then kind of just fell apart in the second half to lose all 3 of their games. I think that there's a couple of factors that go into that, and the fact that they lose their urgency out of halftime, I have no idea. They have an inability to adjust, like I've said. They have a lack of depth on the bench and on the court, in which it's kind of hard because they had 9 players ready to play against Washington State. But also, they have this insane amount of playing time for their starters, which gives very little variety on the floor and also just wears down their players. And that's why I think that they have such an inconsistency when they play full games.
And then finally, Zach, is it unrealistic to think that ASU might get an invite to the NIT tournament if they finish out the season strong?
Well, actually, after the Washington game, I really was optimistic that this team had presented a strong case. 6-9 in the Pac-12, 6-8 at the time in the Pac-12, and a game under 500. But a sweep to getting swept by Washington State effectively ended their opportunity to make the NIT. To get in at this point, I'd say they need to win 2, possibly even 3 games in Vegas, which is unlikely, if impossible, at this point in the season. So, unfortunately, Bobby Hurley's team will be going home following the Pac-12 tournament.
Alrighty, guys. Well, we'll have to see if the men's team can finish the season strong. Thank you, two, for joining me. While the men's basketball team had an interesting weekend, the women's team had a disappointing one. It was announced that Kelsey Moose would be back in the lineup for Arizona State for the first time since early January. They were facing the worst team in the Pac-12 and the University of Arizona on both Friday and Sunday. It would have been an easy weekend for the women to gain ground on the 4th seed in the Pac-12, which is UCLA. Instead, the women put themselves in a tough situation as they lost to Arizona on Friday. Now, they were able to beat Arizona on Sunday, but the loss on Friday puts Arizona State in a situation that they aren't used to. They are the 6th best team in the Pac-12, and they are facing a must-win situation. I'm now joined by Jordan Kaye and Leah Soto to help me figure out the latest for the Sun Devils. Thank you, two, for joining me. So, Jordan, I'll go ahead and I will start with you. The Sun Devils, they get Moose back, but they're still unable to win on Friday against the worst team in the Pac-12. The guard play has was the biggest difference from that Friday game to that Sunday game? What's going on with the backcourt right now?
Well, in the game they lost against Arizona, they had all 5 of the guards had 15 combined points on like 24 shots. It was just a terrible play. They weren't aggressive. They weren't going to the hole. They were settling for just horrible shots from the outside. They were holding the ball, letting it get. But then you come last night when they go and play U of A in Tempe. Much better game. Sabrina Haynes has 13 points, leads all the guards. Then Riley Richardson has 7. And I think with Kelsey Moose coming back, now ASU's only starting 2 guards, which is giving a lot more depth and a lot more rest to everyone else, making everyone more fresh when they come on the court, and hopefully that should be a better result.
So, Leah, Jordan just talked about the guard play, but what has been the biggest difference, what was the biggest difference, from Friday's game to Sunday's game regarding the team in general?
Definitely the intensity between the 2 games was greatly improved. ASU came out fighting in the second game, and they kept fighting the entire time. They were aggressive. They capitalized on turnovers, and they were just able to play really physical basketball, and it really helped them and paid off in the end.
So, Jordan, what does the postseason look like for the Sun Devils this season?
Well, currently ASU is tied for the 5th spot in the Pac-12 standings, and they're definitely going to miss off on a first-round bye in the Pac-12 tournament. Barring something magnificent in the Pac-12 tournament, it looks like they're going to be about a 7 or an 8 seed in the NCAA tournament, which isn't that bad, but coming off a number 2 seed last year, it's definitely going to be much different. But, I mean, they're going to have to go and play on the road the entire tournament, so it's really going to see if they can get things going in the Pac-12 tournament, and maybe they can jump into a 5 or a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament, but it's looking like they're just going to be middle of the pack in both tournaments.
And then finally, Leah, what does this team need to do to beat USC?
I think they need to do exactly what they did in that second game against Arizona. They need to play with intensity, physicality, aggression. They need to make sure that they're getting all their shots in, and they need to make sure that they're keeping up with their opponent and not getting tired and letting that tiredness affect how they play.
Alrighty, well, we'll have to see if getting Kelsey Moose back does indeed help and, is that missing piece for the Sun Devils. Thank you, too, for joining me. No, you weren't going crazy. There wasn't any Arizona State hockey this past weekend. The Sun Devils had the week off as they prepare for their last series of the season. They will be traveling to Michigan this upcoming weekend to take on the United States under-18 national team. Now, this series won't count against the Sun Devils, but this is a big series for the Devils as they will look to be competitive against one of the best national hockey teams, frankly, in the entire world. With the hockey season winding down, it is time to reflect and look towards the future as the hockey team has a very promising future ahead of them. I'm now joined by Ethan Schmidt to help talk about what the future holds for the Sun Devils. Thank you for joining me, Ethan. So, Ethan, explain to me why the team is exactly, playing the national team at all.
Well, Hunter, I think it's just both sides. It's just kind of been the theme of the Sun Devil season to take on new challenges, gain new experience, and that's what the U.S. under-18 team's all about. They come together, and their main focus as a team is development of skills and gaining experience against older competitors as the U18 team takes on NCAA Division I programs throughout their season, along with USHL matchups, and they also play 3 international tournaments in their respective season. So the US 18 team kind of is just for a team to develop, and most of the young players on the team have already committed to North American colleges. And names like Patrick Kane and Austin Matthews have came from the developmental league. So there is, you talked about already, there's a lot of elite talent that's just budding out of this, and I think Greg Powers wants to take on that challenge, just give the Sun Devils one last experience with such a young team coming down at the end of the season.
All right, so after this series, the season's over, but there are some really good recruits coming in. How do you think that they're going to work themselves into the fold?
Well, the Sun Devils brought in the 13th best recruiting class in the nation according to NeutralZone.net, and there's 5 recruits that I think are just going to stand out for this team. They're going to come on to this young Sun Devils team and make an impact already because Greg Powers doesn't care how young you are. If you're talented and you're ready to play, he's going to put you on the ice. So the biggest player that they landed was Patrick Kula. He's a defenseman. He's been playing in the USHL currently, and he's an Arizona Coyotes draft pick. So he's going to come here and be locally for his future NHL team. He was the second-ranked 1996 birth year recruit in the nation, and where I think he's going to fit in really well for the Sun Devils is joining this year's freshman, Brinson Pasichnuk, who really stepped up on the blue line. I think Kudla could really be his partner on the blue line, and he brings a lot of offense through puck handling and distributing the puck up to the forwards. So Patrick Kudla, the big name. And then moving on to Tyler Maltby, a forward. He plays in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. He's big, Hunter. He brings a lot of size up front. I think he's going to crash the net, set screens for the Sun Devils, bring a lot of offense. He has 36 goals, 30 assists for a total of 66 points through only 47 games played. So he's an offensive machine. And then the second forward in the recruiting class is Johnny Walker. He's from the USHL. I think he brings a lot of skill and puck awareness. He has 27 total points through 34 games played in his current USHL season. And then we move on to a big international recruit landed, Gavito Janssens. He's been playing in the North American Hockey League. He's from Latvia, so he's the third international player joining the Sun Devils roster, along with Jacob Stridesberg and Georgi Gorodetsky. He's a huge defenseman, Hunter, 6'4", 209 pounds, and he's averaging a point per game in the NHL, 40 total points through 40 games played in his current season. And last but not least, we have Jacob Wilson coming in, another defenseman. I think it's just going to add to the depth of this team on the blue line, and he's the team captain of his respective USHL team this season.
Alrighty, so obviously it seems like you were very excited for this upcoming recruiting class.
Yes, I am.
But is there another area on this team that you are really looking forward to next season?
Well, going forward, it's just about the young players just maturing and taking on these challenges. I really think that the Sun Devils have something special brewing, and they're just going off the blueprint that Penn State set by becoming a full-time Division I NCAA program, and I think the Sun Devils are going to just take after that mantra. They're so young, only losing 4 seniors after this season. Still such a young team, and bringing in these good, solid recruits just to add even more depth. The team's young and full of talent, so going forward, they just have to find their identity, and I think the new recruits are going to add a lot more offense. Despite the Sun Devils scoring under 3 goals per game this season, I think it's really going to improve next season. So I'm excited to see a more offensive development.
All right, Ethan. Well, we'll have to see how this hockey team fares against, the USA under-18 national team. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Hunter.
A rain-filled weekend forced the cancellation of both Day 2 and Day 3 of the Littlewood Classic. After a promising start, which saw the Sun Devils down both Wichita State and Illinois State, their highly anticipated matchup against number 19 Missouri unfortunately never happened. Now, with a 9-0 record, the Sun Devils play Boston College at home before heading off to California to participate in the Mary Nutter Classic, a weekend that will see them play 5 games, with 2 of those games being against top 20 teams in Texas A&M and Michigan. I'm now joined by Sam Ficarro and Alec Henden to help me preview this upcoming weekend for the Sun Devils. Thank you two for joining me. So Alec, I'll go ahead and start with you. Giselle Juarez, a freshman pitcher for ASU, pitched her first career complete game. What would it mean for the Sun Devils if she could be a reliable, backup behind Dale Rendak and Brianna Maha?
It would be everything to this team. First of all, she's left-handed, so you get a different look for the hitters, which is big. She's a freshman. She's gone out, had success. Her last start was a complete game against Illinois State, like you mentioned. She's thrown 14 innings, only allowed 3 earned runs. She has the best ERA on the staff right now at 1.67. So if she can step up and be a great third option, the Sun Devils' chances to make a deep run and possible college softball World Series chances go through the roof, especially in the tough Pac-12.
All right, Sam, so obviously a tough weekend coming up for ASU. Do you think that they can compete with 2 top 20 teams?
Yeah, it'll be hard. Unfortunately, they didn't get the test this week in Missouri. That would have been a good matchup. They were ranked 17th in the country, but they got rained out because of poor weather this weekend. But they do have a tough competition coming up in the next 2 weekends. They have Michigan twice, Notre Dame, Texas, Baylor. So a lot of teams that were formerly ranked are currently ranked. So it'll be a big test for ASU to see where they stack up in the nation and potentially in the Pac-12 as well.
So, Alec, what do you see happening this weekend for ASU? Will they still be undefeated come this time next week, or do you think that maybe there might be some questions that start surrounding this team?
I think they'll have a loss this weekend, maybe a couple. I don't know if questions is the right answer to put it, but if they compete and they say 3-3 in their 6 matchups, get a win against A&M would be tough. I think they're number 6 in the country. But if they can at least split that weekend on the road series, neutral site, I think they should feel pretty good about their chances the rest of the season. It is tough, the weather this weekend. You come to Arizona expecting no rain, and then you get rained out in February. In the classics, you want to win at home. But it will be a good test to see how this team's depth is enough to make a deep run.
All right, and then finally, Sam, how do you see this ASU team stacking up in the Pac-12? You talked about it. This is going to be a huge weekend for them to see, potentially where they stack up nationally, but where do you think they stack up within the Pac-12?
Yeah, I think including ASU, there are, I believe, 6 ranked Pac-12 teams. That's a lot of teams. They have UCLA, Oregon, Arizona, Cal. So it's a very stacked conference. Obviously, they all have experience in making deep runs in the tournament, which ASU didn't have the last couple of seasons. They are also known, though, for having stout pitching. So it'll be really interesting to see if Brianna Maha and Dale Rindak can meet the top-level starters of the other Pac-12 teams, and if they have the hitting to hit off against these really star pitchers.
Alrighty, guys. Well, we'll have to wait and see if this time next week we are singing the praises about an undefeated softball team. Thank you, too, for joining me. Well, the baseball team also had a rainy weekend. They, unfortunately, had a game that had to get moved to Friday. They had to play a doubleheader on Friday, and then they had to play a game against Northwestern that got rained out Saturday. They moved it to Sunday, but they were able to get the sweep of the Northwestern Wildcats, thanks to a strong start from the freshman class and a nice start from the pitching staff. But the Sun Devils will face possibly their hardest test of the season this upcoming weekend when they will take on the #1 team in the country in TCU. But before the Sun Devils get ahead of themselves, they have a Tuesday afternoon game against Oklahoma State, a team that can shock the Sun Devils if they aren't careful. I'm now joined by Nicole Eldridge and Killian McClatchey to help me break down the past weekend for the Sun Devils. Thank you, too, for joining me. So, Killian, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. Who stood out to you in this first series?
There were a couple guys that really stood out, especially freshman Lyle Lynn. The guy, he's first base and catcher. He's playing both positions a little bit. Looks a little uncomfortable over at first base, but he's naturally a catcher, so that's understandable. But he went 7-13 in his first career series for ASU. He had 3 RBIs, and he doesn't look, like I said, he doesn't look too comfortable at first base. But that's something you're going to fix along the ways. The thing is I'm really impressed with the way he gets up there to the plate. His presence there, he's not afraid to get in and up on the plate. He's kind of guy, he's got a beautiful swing through the strike zone. And I really enjoyed watching him this weekend. I feel like he's going to prosper, especially moving forward in the season, too.
All right, so Nicole, Killian just talked about it. Lyle Lynn, very good weekend, but Sam Ferry also had a very good weekend. And both of them, of course, they're trying to move Lyle Lynn to that first base position, but he is naturally a catcher. So who should we expect to be the main catcher this season?
Yeah, with that being said, Lyle Lynn, he had 13 at-bats and the 7 hits. And then Ferry had 4 at-bats and 2 hits, and with that Lyle Lynn playing at first base, I think we could expect Ferry to be behind home plate as a catcher.
Alrighty, and then Killian, obviously a huge week coming up for the Sun Devils as they play both Oklahoma State and TCU. What does this team need to do to, this time next week, come home with a winning record?
I think the big thing is the bats need to really heat up, especially early. The Oklahoma State game, it's one of those bigger ones. It's a nice midweek. We get an interesting. Zach Dixon's going to be the starter for that one. It'll be interesting to see how he does. Getting his first start since his last win against Gonzaga in the regional last year. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. But the pitching staff, they have to stay strong throughout. That's one of the big things. The depth really showed in this last weekend. James Ryan did a really nice job. So did Reagan Todd. Both of them had really good outings all weekend. But the big thing is going to be the bats, especially against a #1 team like TCU. If that offense doesn't get rolling, it could be a long weekend.
And then finally, Nicole, what should we realistically expect from this team moving forward?
I think we could see them being pretty good because with the second game of the doubleheader on Friday, they were losing, but then they ended up coming back in the bottom of the 9th inning and winning, and I think that just shows that they don't stop putting up a fight until the game is actually over.
Alrighty, well, we will have to see how they fare against Oklahoma State and TCU this weekend. Thank you two for joining me. Well, we aren't quite done yet. While we've talked about men's and women's basketball, along with hockey, softball, and baseball on today's show, there's one guy who always likes to have the last word. Take it away, Matt.
What's up, everyone? My name is Matt Stolbof, and this is the last word. Well, I believe this time of year is when Arizona is truly at its best. The weather's nice, there's no snow to worry about, it's not humid out, you can pack up your jeans, and it isn't even March yet. It really puts me in a good mood. But you know what's really making me happy these days? ASU baseball. The team has started off in a fantastic way. They're 3-0, sweeping Northwestern in 3-1, 4-3, and 6-2. They're winning in all different ways. They're hitting when it counts. In the second game of the doubleheader on Friday, ASU was able to come back after being down 3-2 in the ninth inning, thanks to a game-time hit by Andrew Snow and a walk-off single up the left side by senior Sebastian Zawada. Another thing they're doing is pitching. I mentioned last week that junior Eli Lingos will be crucial to the success of ASU's pitching this season. So far, he's looking like an ace they were hoping for. Against Northwestern, Lingos pitched 6 2/3 of flawless baseball, striking out 6 Wildcats while giving up no runs. The team as a whole has an ERA of 1. Remember that this team's ERA last year was 4.19. I say that's a pretty big difference. Now, I know we can't get our hopes up too high. This could very well be the football season all over again. But definitely be optimistic, as this team has the potential to be truly as nice as the Arizona weather in February. For the last word, I'm Matt Stolbof.
Well, that's our show. Thank you for joining us, and you can keep up with everyone that appeared on the show by reading their articles on devilsindetail.com. You can keep up to date with everything Arizona State athletics by following Devils in Detail on Twitter at Devils_detail. Make sure to subscribe to the Devils in Detail YouTube page to be notified first about all of our videos, including roundtable discussions about your favorite Arizona State sports. Thank you again for joining us, and from everyone here in Phoenix, I'm Hunter Robinson saying we hope to see you again soon.